All right, welcome back, guys. We are going to finish up our material today regarding integumentary system. So we don't have too much left. So let's go ahead and finish it up for us. So let's go ahead and find where we left off. Where we left off, we were talking about acne. With regards to acne, we mentioned how it is a bacterial infection. It's due to a buildup of oil in the hair follicle region, and it clogs that whole area. And then it's going to cause an infection to occur, leading to the immune system attacking that region and in turn causing inflammation. And that inflammation is what you physically see on the skin. Okay, next we got athlete's foot. Athlete's foot, or tinea pedis, that's the Latin for it. I'm perfectly fine with athlete's foot. It is a fungal infection that can grow and multiply on human skin. Fungal infections are really unique because unlike bacterial and viral infections, fungi reproduce via spores. They secrete spores that travel in the air and travel on animals, sometimes get to us, and these spores can physically grow on your skin. This particular fungus, and fungus in general, honestly, or fungi in general, grows best in a dark, moist, and warm environment. So what is a dark, moist, and warm environment? Your shoes. A foot inside of a shoe is a perfect place for the fungus. It's a big reason why if you're exercising, they always suggest that you wear socks with your shoes so that way, you know, the moisture from your feet doesn't affect the shoes overall. That's a much better process. I've always suggested if you have smelly shoes, like bad odor, there's sprays you can buy, but they're so much easier and cheaper. Put the shoes in a giant gallon-sized Ziploc bag and then throw it in the freezer overnight. That cold temperature will destroy any sort of bacteria or viruses or germs that could be in the shoes. And typically bad odor is due to bacteria. This particular fungal infection can also affect the groin. And if it affects the groin, we call that jock itch. Typically that's due to jock straps that can be worn during any sport to protect the genital region. So obviously not good. But the good news is when it comes down to fungal infections, we've known about them for so long that we know how to treat them. There are natural herbal methods of treating it. There's also powders that you can apply, and this stuff can be really easily worked around. Dermatitis, contact dermatitis. So remember, dermatitis is basically a rash. It's characterized by redness, swelling, itchiness, and scaling of the skin. Scaling is basically when the skin literally starts to look more like reptile skin because of this constant regrowth and deterioration of the skin, and it looks layered almost. Typically, dermatitis is due to an allergic response. I mentioned how I have a slight allergen to dander, which is pet hair. So anytime that I go home and I visit my family and we have pets at home, there's a chance that my dander allergy starts to overreact. And when that happens, when that happens, I do get a slight rash on my skin. Nothing drastic, of course, but it's just enough that I notice it, and it tends to go away pretty quickly. That rash tends to go away in about a minute or two. Nothing too dramatic, thankfully. Again, allergies are stuff that we're going to learn more about in future units. They can vary dramatically on how it affects the body and as far as how your body has an allergic response. Good news is there's a ton of lotions and creams to help deal with allergic response overall. Okay, psoriasis, super serious type of inflammation. So it's similar to dermatitis, but I consider it like dermatitis times 10. Patches of raised reddish skin covered by silvery white scales. This is someone's back. All these splotchy regions, that's all psoriasis. The skin often itches and it may crack and bleed. That is one of the worst parts about it. We've all had a rash before. You know that when you have a rash, you're itchy, your skin gets super itchy, and we're very impulsive, right? We want to scratch it. When you scratch it, that skin is super sensitive, and you can really easily crack the skin and cause bleeding. When you cause it to bleed, you now have an open wound, which can cause infection. Not to mention, if you continuously crack the skin, you can cause it to scar. So this is all stuff that it can be really hard to work around. More than 4.5 million adults, that number is a little older now, so it's even higher than that, have been diagnosed with psoriasis in the United States. It is typically a condition that affects adults, but it can affect also young people. The hard part about it is that the cause of psoriasis, it varies. It can be genetic, it can be solar exposure, it can be dietary. And on top of that, there's no cure for psoriasis. The good news is there's a lot of treatment for it, though. There's medicine that you can take, and there's lotions that you can apply that help with the redness, that help with the swelling, that help with the itchiness, and it can make it that you live a more normal life. Okay, last couple bits of information here. Skin cancer. It is the most prevalent type of cancer compared to all other types of cancer. I would make sure that you know that any suffix ending in OMA is going to be indicative of cancer. So I would just be aware of that. So anything ending in OMA is typically going to be a cancer. So typically skin cancer is associated with exposure to ultraviolet light, so too much UV. But there are other factors that can cause it. So hereditary, your family. So sometimes there are people who live very healthy lives but still get skin cancer. So if you have family members that have it, be careful. It could be a genetic thing. There's other times that it can be chemical exposure. If the air, like in the country you live in, if the air is very polluted, you absorb the chemicals through your skin. That could be toxic. Nowadays, this doesn't really happen as far as like chemical exposure in the workplace. But if you go back 80, 90 years ago, when labor laws were not as strict, 100%, you go to a factory, work there 10 hours, and all the fumes from the factory, you're just absorbing that through your skin and your lungs. Now, there are 3 types of skin cancer that I need us to know. So let's get through that in just a second. Okay, basal cell carcinoma. Basal cell carcinoma is the most common type of skin cancer. And by definition, it's also the least dangerous. So for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and underline least dangerous. Starts in the epidermis, so it starts in the surface of your skin and extends to the dermis or subcutaneous or hypodermis. 99% recovery. The vast majority of people that ever get basal cell carcinoma recover from this, which is good news. That's what you would like to see. That it's not something too terribly serious, but it is still a cancer. That means it could become something more serious if left untreated. Squamous cell carcinoma. For squamous, I'm going to go ahead and just write down to the side medium danger. AKA, it's more serious than basal cell carcinoma, but it's not as serious as the next one that we're about to talk about, malignant melanoma. So it's right in between. This starts in the epidermis as well, occurs more frequently on the scalp and lower lip. It grows quickly, so the thing you have to be careful with is that it can spread to the lymphatic system, and once it spreads to the lymphatic system, we're in trouble. Chances of recovery, though, are good if caught early. That's the key thing. I always tell people, your best bet for your body and being preventative, because that's the point of medicine. Yes, there's going to be doctors and nurses and medical staff to help you when you're sick, but the point of medicine is to prevent you getting sick in the first place. What's one of the best ways you can prevent from getting something serious? Examine your body. Check yourself out. A simple solution, once a week or so when you're showering because you're already naked and you're by yourself, right? Just examine yourself, take a look. If something looks odd, if something feels wrong, then go to a doctor and get it checked out for sure. Okay. Finally, our more serious type of cancer, skin cancer that we need to discuss is malignant melanoma. Remember, OMA is a cancer, right? We saw that with carcinoma as well. Melan at the top, the prefix of the word, that is going to indicate melanin, the pigment, the protein that is secreted that creates our color, our pigment. And that's created by the melanocytes. Melanocytes are special cells that create this stuff. Because those cells can become cancerous, it can become a lot harder to identify the cancer. It's not as easy because with basal and squamous cell carcinoma, typically when someone gets cancer, you'll see it as a mole. You'll see it as a physical structure on their skin. This type of cancer spreads quickly to other areas of the body. Most deadly. Treatment in this case is typically surgery and chemo. Surgery in the sense that if they find the skin that's been severely affected by this, they'll try to remove it entirely. Chemo is almost always a requirement just because it depends on how far the cancer has gone. If the cancer is already starting to spread, your only bet is chemo. And chemo, you're basically nuking. The analogy I give is that you have a village of 100 people. In that village, you have, let's say, 10 of them who are bad people that you want to get rid of. If you're dropping a nuke in this area, sure, you may have killed 10 people, but you also probably killed 90 others. So, yes, chemo is supposed to target the cancer cells and eradicate them, but it also destroys millions of your healthy cells. And that's what makes people it goes through hell. Appetite gets totally shot. You lose a lot of weight. You lose body hair. Your energy levels drop significantly while you're on chemo. It's not an easy task. And unfortunately, the worst thing about cancer is that somebody could go through the chemo, beat cancer, and sometimes the cancer comes back through remission. Over time, it can return because that means there were still remnants of it that was left behind. So that's one of the hardest things about it. And in my opinion, I think the solution for it, at least in the near future, would be genetic editing. Using things like CRISPR and gene editing tools, you could theoretically find other creatures like sharks that have a higher resistance to cancer and see if we could find that part of the genome and put that in our genomes and see if that's something that could be realistic and see if that's something that could reduce the chances of cancer significantly. Because it's not like you're eradicating it. It's not like you're getting rid of it. I don't think we're there anytime soon. Here you see a PET scan of a patient. All these darker blobs, that's all cancer. So pretty severe in his case. Finally, professions. I don't need us to worry too much about this. I'll just kind of verbally get through it. These are professions that work with skin. Dermatology, obviously, is the study of medicine that's associated with the skin. You can be a cosmetic dermatologist. You can also be someone who works with burn victims. You can do a lot of different stuff. Esthetician, the aesthetic of something is all about beauty. So if you're an esthetician, then that means you're focusing on the beauty of the person, which typically is the face. RN or LVN, those are going to be nurses. These are people who can be working in burn units and working with skin and skincare treatment. Makeup artists, not anyone who's on camera is going to have a makeup artist, right? But not only just that, makeup artists play a major role in special effects. A lot of your favorite movies, especially horror films, they use practical effects instead of CGI. Using practical effects makes it look so much more real. CGI, while the potential for CGI is borderline limitless, if it doesn't look great, it's going to look bad. That's always how it plays out. Cytologist is someone who works in cytology, which is the study of cells. You could be a cytologist who works on skin cells more specifically, so you could be really hyper precise. And then finally, histotechnician. Technicians, I think, is worth bringing up because technicians are people who are very important and necessary in the medical field, but they don't need a college degree. You can become a technician by getting a high school degree and then getting a certification. Most certifications take 2 to 3 semesters, so that's nowhere near as much time as it would take you to get a 4-year degree, and you're making decent money. Most technicians are making somewhere in the $60,000 to $80,000 range, depending on where you live and depending on your field and all these type of variables. But a technician, specifically a histotechnician, if you were to go to a doctor and you're like, hey, doc, I have this mole on my arm, and the doctor examines it and says, yeah, that doesn't look good. We're going to take a little biopsy, which is a sample of it. The person who comes in to take the sample is the technician. Very important job. So it's something that's worth bringing up. And that's it. These are some videos that are embedded into my notes. I also have it in Canvas, but it's just Crash Course. I think Crash Course does a great job of reviewing content. It's a 2-part video for Crash Course as far as integumentary system. So there's quite a bit of content to cover and review. But on that note, guys, I think that's where we're going to finish for this unit. I appreciate you guys checking in. Other than that, I'll see you guys on the next one. Have a great one.